So how did this start? So obviously, you know, I have a guitar. let's start there.
I don't think I know the answer to this, by the way. So I'm very interested.
So the two of us have written and recorded. It's funny because I was putting together the bio that's gonna be like on Spotify, etc. You and I have written and recorded over 100 songs. Easily over 100. It might be close to 150, but like
wow.
And so because I wrote something like a stark departure from his over 100 multi-genre comedic songs written and recorded as part of the duo Rhett&Link, you know.
Should have said Lonely Island. That would have helped you.
I think we've written and recorded way more songs than Lonely Island. Maybe not as good, but a lot more. We're more prolific in certain way, in terms of the number of tracks. But we've written a lot of music, and you know, the majority of that music was written in a way where it was like I had a guitar somewhere and I would like come up with some rhythm and structure and just like put it in a voice memo and then show up and we would write to it, right? So it has been a habit over the past 20 years. I've got a guitar in every place that I go. I've got a guitar in the office, I got a guitar in my bedroom. But we tend to get really busy with things and I'll go months without picking my guitar up. And we just get so deep into some new project that may or may not have music. And if it doesn't have music, it's just like, I'm not picking my guitar up. My fingers I was like, I don't have calluses anymore on my fingers, like they wear off. But I think it was 2019, and my guitar is in my bedroom and I pick it up and I'm kind of like just diddling around on it. And the next thing you know,
diddling yourself.
I'm beginning to write and this is unusual because I've never done this. In the past 20 years, if I start playing something and start singing something and start writing something, it is always exclusively what I would call a business decision, okay? It means I am writing this song as part of the mythical thing that me and you have built together, and it is obviously going to be for the purpose, it's a comedy song. It's, we could use this in something or whatever, or I need to write a song for Buddy System soundtrack or something like that, right?
Right, which I think is the last time we were really intensely writing songs, was Buddy System Season 2, and it was so—
Well, actually it was the music for the tour.
That's right.
We came back and we wrote the few new songs that we, like Why I Travel, Kyle, the Shirt song.
Which interestingly enough, like, so Buddy System Season 2, it was very collaborative. It was very last minute, to the point where we were going on separate vacations right before filming, and we had to divide up songs, something we had never done. And you said,
yeah, because we were so under the gun.
We were so under the gun. I had to write one song, you had to write another song, and we had to commit that we were both gonna bring them back, basically done.
Yeah.
Which was unusual. And then for the tour, the Rhett&Link live tour in 2019, you wanted to start playing piano, and so then you made yourself write Why I Travel on the piano. That really wasn't, I didn't add too much to that song, as much as I recall. I don't recall doing much to it. And then in the other ones, like Kyle, that was a little more collaborative, and then the Shirt song, it just isn't memorable. I mean, it had a memorable scene when we were fighting.
The Shirt song is performance art. It's not really a song that you want to listen to.
Yeah.
It's a song.
But those—
a song you might want to watch.
You just kind of went away and wrote those because, again, we were in this divide and conquer mode, and music, you know, and the tour was kind of like get in where you fit in kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of, even in that, yeah, you started more and more initiating Rhett&Link songs on your own. But this time, in 2019, you sat down, you weren't thinking about a business move, you weren't thinking about an obligation, a creative obligation.
I was like, I've got this idea, and really it wasn't like, I'm going to sit down and write a song. It was like, I'm playing the guitar and I kind of like what I'm hearing here, and I'm just starting to kind of sing a melody. Usually I'll sing a melody that is nonsensical, words that just sound good, and I'll make a voice memo, just so it's just like, oh, I want to remember this melody that I came up with. And you sing words that sound good that don't make sense, right? This is a very common songwriting technique. And so, but I was like, saying words that did make sense, and I realized that I was writing a song to God. Okay? I was writing a song to God.
Oh.
And when I say writing a song to God, as someone who doesn't necessarily believe in God at this point, I was writing a song to the idea that I had of God in the past. And, you know, basically writing a song like, I had a relationship with you. So if you don't know.
Do you remember the first line that kind of came out of it?
I still remember when we used to talk. You never said much, but I knew what you thought.
Huh.
So that was the first line that came out. And so I was like, oh, this is kind of like, if you're not a Christian or a former Christian or a spiritual person, maybe you wouldn't pick up on the thematic imagery here, and you might think I'm just writing a song about a lost love, because it's about a relationship that you had, and like being like, I've got these it's called old letters. It's like, I've got these old letters that you wrote to me, and I sit down and read them, the Bible. You know, I don't like giving I want you to listen to the music and interpret it for yourself, but this one's pretty obvious, I guess. But I was writing it and I was like, I don't know who this is for. I don't know why. I don't know. I'm not like, I'm writing a song because I'm going to have a music project one day. It was very much just like, oh, this is coming out of me in a very easy way. And it's interesting because I'm not trying to be funny. There's no jokes in this song. It's very serious and it's very sincere. And it happened very quickly. That's one of the things about there's 11 songs on the finished album, and all of them, you know, the process between beginning to write and then record or like fine tuning the lyrics, that may have been a months long process, but with rare exception, the writing of the music and the first pass of the song is usually something that happens when I just sit down and do it in about 1 to 2 hours. And then I've got a song, right? I'm gonna come back, I'll change that lyric, I'll work on that, whatever, but they usually come out really easy. If I sit down in this hard, I'm like, I'm doing this for fun. It's not a business decision. It's not a job, so there's no forced creative.
So this first song, Letters.
Yeah.
It came out, it pretty much it formed in that sitting. And then what?
So I sat down and like recorded a demo of it, but I wouldn't have called it a demo. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna record this. And I actually recorded it in like the Evernote audio record. I don't know if you've ever done this, but like Evernote has you can press add audio, and it's so low quality. It sounds like something like out of the 20s compared to like if you just do a voice memo and attach it, interestingly. And I was just like, okay, I did that. Now this is 2019. At some point after that, I would say months after that, I just kind of told my therapist about it. I was like, yeah, I wrote, we were having lots.
Can you pull it up, play a little bit of it?
I don't want to do that.
Because that's not
not the single.
Okay.
It's actually the last song on the album.
Okay.
Maybe I'll play that when, because you can see how different the final version ended up being. Maybe
that's
I'll play
fair.
Once the album comes out. But I'm talking to my therapist about it, and we were having a lot of broader conversations about me getting into a place where I was in creative flow, and him just recognizing like, seems like when you're healthy and you're thriving and you're experiencing joy when you're in a creative flow. Now, obviously, I'm in a creative flow a lot with what we do for a living, because this is a creative business. This is a content business. So I'm doing lots of writing. I'm doing a lot of creative things, but it's also a very sophisticated business with a lot of moving parts. And those business parts, which I do think that both of us are really good at, isn't necessarily life-giving and doesn't breathe a lot of joy. It's kind of like, well, if you want to do this right, you got to do this right. So you got to answer these business questions, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. For other people, business can get them into flow, but that's not really our thing.
Yeah. And so my therapist, without getting specific, was just like saying like, yeah, you should just, I'm telling him about writing this song. He's like, when you talk about that, I kind of see you light up a little bit. So I would just encourage you to continue to just, express yourself creatively and move towards things where you can express yourself creatively. He wasn't being like, go do an album. So it wasn't like I was like, okay, yes, I'm gonna do that. It was like, I really enjoyed that. Maybe I'll do it again. Pandemic rolls around, 2020.
Yeah.
And our lives changed drastically like everyone else's. We were obviously still really busy. We were doing everything that we were doing with Mythical and trying to keep all our content streams going. But, less travel, more time at home. I got this guitar in my bedroom. I got a guitar at the Creative House. I got a guitar here. I got guitars everywhere, right? And so I just found myself as a way of sort of like passing the time, picking up my guitar and beginning to play. And I just started finding that every time I did that, a song would come out of nowhere, right? And so then, before I knew it, I had written a song to my parents. I had written a song to my children. I had written a song to my wife. I talked about the song that I wrote for Valentine's Day that we talked about on the podcast.
Yeah.
That I played for her, which is a song that I ended up writing for her.
Oh yeah, you're not talking about when you were dating. You're talking about like
I did it when I was dating too. I'm talking about like
you did a 2020.
It's probably 2021 Valentine's Day is when I probably talked about it.
Okay.
But what was happening is without any real calculation, all the songs that I was writing were more like it was a cathartic sort of therapeutic way of thinking about my deconstruction. So I point out those songs, and one to my parents, one to my kids, one to my wife, as what was happening with me is I've had this very long process of deconstruction. And as I've talked about many times, my spiritual deconstruction on its surface it was a very intellectual thing, right? I wasn't wronged by someone emotionally. I didn't have a pastor do me wrong. I didn't have the rug pulled out from underneath me. It was just a very slow process of access to new information that was increasingly more difficult to reconcile with my Christian worldview to the breaking point, right? But that doesn't mean that there weren't incredibly heavy emotional things happening, relational things like deconstructing from a faith that your parents gave you and they still have. Being a father to kids when they were born, you're taking them up in front of the church and dedicating them to God. And then no longer believing in that God in the same way and no longer adhering to a biblical or Christian worldview and still wanting the best for them. Like, what is that? So what I would find is that the way for me to process all these emotions was to write a song about it. So I started talking more and more to my therapist about this, and he was like, this is bringing something out in you. And just started talking to Jessie about it. And she was like, it's not, anyone who knows me well knows that it's, I am a very emotional person, but on the surface you don't see that. But there's a lot going on. You got to kind of tap into it, and it has to come out in a certain way for you to be like, oh, this dude was feeling a whole lot of things. And so I just kept going and going. And again, the thought as I was writing these songs was like, this is a therapeutic, cathartic process. Now, of course, I am a full-time entertainer. And so as I'm getting to like the third and fourth song, I'm like, I'm making something here. Yes, I'm doing this for myself. Yes, it is a therapeutic process. Yes, I do feel like there's like an emotional release every time I do this, but I'm making something here.
Okay.
And the last thing I'll talk about before we actually listen to the single is why it's called James and the Shame, right? Why is it not Rhett McLaughlin? So at some point early on, I had this idea that, well, what if this was like a covert thing that I didn't even talk about, but I just put out there? And then I started thinking about the fact that so much of, if the whole point of this thing is to connect with people who are experiencing something similar or can relate, well, one of the things that has been has brought those people out of the woodwork is me sharing these things through the public forum that I have as the public person that I am.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it doesn't make sense to not talk about it or try to make it seem like there's just some new country guy who's talking about spiritual things. And if you want to know about it, you can. But I was like, but I don't want it to be Rhett McLaughlin. I don't want it to be my name. I want it to be something that is like, hey, this is something outside of everything else that this guy does. When you hear the name Rhett McLaughlin, you think Rhett&Link, comedy. I'm not supposed to take this seriously. When is the joke? When was the first punchline coming in this song?
Right.
And also,
it becomes pretty obvious pretty quick.
And I didn't want it to be a distraction for somebody who stumbles across it in a playlist or something on Spotify to be like, Rhett McLaughlin. If what I have put out into the world professionally, which is a bunch of lighthearted, silly stuff to take your mind off things, isn't your cup of tea, I don't want you to not want to listen to this if this would actually be something you'd be into. So that's where James and the Shame came from. James and the Shame, not only does it rhyme, does it kind of roll off the tongue, but again, shame is the dominant sort of emotion of the Enneagram 3, of someone who is performance-minded. So the twos, the threes, and the fours in the Enneagram are all in the heart triad. And that means that there's a whole lot going on in here that they try to deal with in certain ways. And the way the 3 deals with their shame is to try to keep performing for you. Just keep watching me do cool things, and you won't have to know who I really am and who I'm ashamed of. And so that whole idea of James and the Shame is like, obviously the shame means 2 things. Number one, this was not it is a solo project. I wrote all of the music and all of the lyrics, but the final production includes some other very talented musicians who played different instruments. And so I guess in some ways that represents the other people who collaborated to make these final products. But also, more so than that, it's the shame that follows me around wherever I go. It's like, you got James, you got the shame too.